This is my photographic reference. I have some fields and some trees and of course a big sky. And I'm going to go over how to paint all these trees without getting too fussy because they're really just large shapes within a fairly simple landscape. The first thing I do is I create a value sketch. And this is just a simple sketch outlining where things are with the large trees and some stripes that indicate where the fields and the hedgerows are and some shadows where the clouds in the sky are. And then a much simplified value sketch with just 5 values showing the lightest lights and the darkest darks. Of course, this is a very simplified value sketch, and in the actual painting they're going to be, the simple shapes will be all broken up with many other different values. This is a very simple sketch to get me started. I will start as I normally do with wet and wet. I will first wet the paper. If it's a very dry day, I'll also sometimes wet the back of the paper as well. But I generally wet the paper so that it is shiny and that there's enough water that it will last a good long while, so that the paint can flow, so all the colors can flow together and I can continue to work on it without getting hard edges. I always start with the sky. I learned this from David Taylor, who's an Australian painter, and he is worth looking up. He is an amazing painter. Of course, there are clouds in the sky, but I'm not going to paint the clouds. I'm going to paint around the clouds with some cobalt blue. The shadows in the clouds I will add in a little bit, but I will start with the cobalt blue color. I like to let all my colors run together for the first wash. I think it creates a very lovely effect and a very good base layer. So I'm not overly concerned about the colors running into where the trees are. To get some cloud shapes, I'm using a little Kleenex to lift some of this blue. And now I will start painting in all that green and brown fall colors that we see in the photo. I'll start with the lightest color first because in watercolor we work from light to dark. So I look for the lightest color that is present in the trees. This particular image has some very bright green. I'm not worrying about the branches at this point. You can always go duller in subsequent layers. So my tendency is to start out with some bright colors because I know that I can always make them a little bit duller later. So I'm getting a little puddle here, and I can just suck up a little bit of that extra water very carefully without lifting the paint. Now here's where the paint is starting to dry, so this is where I need to start being a little more careful in how I'm applying the wet paint because I don't necessarily want to cause some blooms. What I'm doing is I'm letting all these colors flow together, knowing that in the second layer I can tighten it up and make them look like plausible trees and like a plausible landscape. As things recede in the background, the colors get a little bit cooler. We have a line of trees in the back here, and the colors are starting to turn in the photograph. So there's a little bit of orange here and there. So I'm going to put a cooler green back here, and I'm leaving a little bit of room to dab in a hint of orange so that we know it's fall. Once again, letting the colors blend together. I don't want to lose that foliage on that orange leaf tree, so I can add that back in while the paper is still wet. I'm simplifying this scene a little bit. There are lots of layers of shrubs and hedgerows. And as long as the paper is damp, you can keep adding colors and working on it. There's a beautiful gold grassy color that we see in the fall. Sometimes that's a little difficult to capture what that color is exactly. It's very light. So the first layer is always quite fresh, and it's important to remember to keep some of that freshness with subsequent layers. You don't want to totally cover up that first layer. In fact, you want to try to keep as much of it as you can visible, because that's where your most beautiful transparent color will be in the painting. So that's the biggest challenge, is to not overwork your painting and to leave some of that first wash intact. The paper has been dried completely. It is bone dry. So now I'm ready for the second layer. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see the work being done on the trees. I'll be working around the page in addition to where the trees are. So now is the time to add in some details. And one of the things we can add in are the trunks and the branches of the trees, which add a lot of structure and make it look less blobby once you add the trunks and the branches. I want to preserve the brightness of the leaves that we see in the trees. So I'm going to paint around those bright leaves. And I'm going to try to preserve that bright first wash that has been laid down already. When there's shadows underneath a tree or underneath boughs of a tree, it's nice to blend them and let those colors blend together. And it's very nice to let the shadows climb into the tree as one shape. And pay attention to the bottom of the tree, because sometimes there's grasses climbing up into the branches. So you can create a shape at the bottom of the tree that defines the grasses that are below it. There's so many colors of leaves. It's not a bad idea to vary your leaf colors as you go along. And pay attention to the values, light to dark, and then back to light. That helps you define the shapes in your painting. As you're painting, there are areas that are a little bit wet, and that's an opportunity to drop in other colors, or also darker colors, which would be less wet paint more the consistency of cream to let them blend together and avoid some hard edges that are unintentional.